We are in speaker view. Hi. Hi, Karen. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Hi, Gloria. Hi there, Janet and Joe. Nice to see everyone. We're going to get started in a few minutes. Just let everybody in first, and then we'll introduce you to our special guest for today. Yeah, thank you, Gloria and Sarah. Thank you, Gloria and Sarah, for beginning to use that chat box already. That's great. Give me a few minutes.
Okay.
Here comes Susan. Do I see a grandfather in there somewhere? I see some grandmothers. Hi, Joe. Hi, Robbie. All right. This is an exciting session. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I was just had the pleasure of speaking with Sarah for a few moments while we came on early to get things set up, and she was just telling me about some of her fascinating experiences and some of the fun things she's done in her career, and we just are really in for a treat today. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And I'm thinking people will join as we go along, but we want to make sure that we get to hear everything that Sarah has to tell us today, and that you have plenty of opportunity to ask questions. Can everybody hear me okay and see everything okay? Yep. Okay, great. So welcome to Get Set Up special event. It's called Being the Best Grandparent Ever with Sarah Johnson. My name's Deb, and I'm a guide at Get Set Up, and I'll be your host today. And I know some of you, so welcome. As a community of active older adults who are looking to really stay informed and connected, Get Set Up is so thrilled to have Sarah with us today to lead us in a discussion on how to be the best grandparent ever. So before we get started, I do want to cover a couple of housekeeping items, and you're probably very familiar with a lot of these, but they're a little bit different for these speaker sessions. For those of you who are tuning in live through our Zoom class, those of you in the room here today, please remember that you are muted right now, and you're going to be muted during the session, but do keep your camera on if you're comfortable, so that we can communicate and connect. You know, we're all in the same room that way. It's kind of nice. And we may be capturing some images to share in the future. As we go along, since you are muted, if you have a clarifying question while Sarah is speaking, just go ahead and raise your virtual hand or let us know in the chat. And then what we will do is find a convenient time to break in and ask Sarah those questions. And I know that Sarah will stop periodically and just ask if there are questions, and that will be a good time. So please let us know. Questions are really welcome. And we are also going to give a good amount of time toward the end of the session to field questions. So feel free to write your questions down, put them in the chat, and we'll have plenty of opportunity for that interaction. Now, for those of you who are joining via our community live streams on Get Set Up TV or on Facebook or maybe on YouTube, you are welcome to enter questions into the comments, and we're going to do our best to address everyone's questions today. Okay, so now on to our special guest. Sarah Johnson has had a very interesting life in the beginning in her career. She was an education correspondent and a children's book columnist for national newspapers. And I'm hoping she'll share with you what she shared with me about a special book that she had the opportunity to review. In the early 2000s, she decided to devote her life to caring for mothers and their families in the perinatal period. She became a doula and a birth educator, and now she is also a holistic sleep consultant. So she's got over 20 years of experience, and I understand a whole wall full of books devoted to birthing and baby care. So she's got a wealth of knowledge to share today. She does run a monthly workshop via Zoom for new grandparents and grandparents to be called the Grandinatal Workshop. And I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that. Grandinatal, am I correct with that, Sarah? Grandinatal Workshop.
Absolutely spot on, Deb.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you. So this workshop is to update the wisdom of the grandparent generation by introducing grandparents to new concepts, because it's hard to keep up with all of those things. There's new things. And Sarah keeps grandparents up to date on those things and about the new discoveries about babies and early parenting. So what we plan to cover today is understanding how to best support new mothers in your life. So if you're a mother with a daughter who's pregnant or other, how will you support your daughter? What bonding really means and why it matters, and identifying 3 do's and 3 don'ts for family members. So those are the things that we're going to cover today. And so I'd just like to say now, Sarah, welcome to Get Set Up. We are so pleased to have you today.
Hello, everybody. It's really such a privilege and pleasure to meet you all. I know everybody's in different time zones. It's just about what we always think of as tea time here in the UK, and I'm really, really glad to meet you. I'm going to do a little screen share. Is that all right, Deb?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. Can everyone see that all right? Yeah. Okay. So yes, I put together, these were pictures that we put together thinking, grandparent, what does that think of? Of course, we had to include the Queen, obviously, right? Okay, because we're in London. This is me with my grandson, Freddie, and my son, his dad. And we just sort of thought, what do grandparents mean to us? And came up with some images. But this is a card which somebody sent me when Freddie was born, and I'm not sure I agree with it entirely. The job of a parent is to bring up a child correctly. The job of a grandparent is to undo all their hard work. So I don't know if that's entirely what I agree with. I think it's worth remembering, though, that we may not always have the same take on parenthood as our children, and that's something that I will cover. So when the Baby Experience, which is a little company that I set up with a colleague, we do various things. We do antenatal education. I'm trained with the biggest parenting organisation in the UK, which is the National Childbirth Trust. We are doulas. In other words, we provide support for mums during birthing. We're not midwives, but we're doulas. I think those of you who are in the US are probably pretty familiar with that concept. And also we are postnatal doulas, which means looking after mums and their babies, particularly mums really, in the first days after birth, in first days, weeks, months, up to a certain limit. I teach something also called hypnobirthing, which is a sort of it's just a birth preparation course really, which is just to help women to sort of relax and feel positive. It's very, very beneficial. We're also offer support for parents having problems with their sleep, not just for babies, but for older children too. And we follow a particular sort of line of thought, which is about working with what the child is biologically capable of and looking at the family as a whole. And sometimes people call this holistic sleep coaching. So it's not sleep training as such, but it's more coaching what is possible and what is biologically appropriate and beneficial. We also, as a company, I mean, I don't do the baby massage and the mum and baby yoga, but that's done by a colleague of mine. And I've been doing this for really nearly 20 years, following on from a career as a journalist, as you know. And one thing that I set up recently was having running, yes, that's meant to be white, by the way, if anyone's wondering what's happened to their computer, that is meant to be white. What I've started running these sessions called the Grandinatal Workshop, because I realized that I'd been doing this kind of stuff and learning all about, babies and everything for quite some time, whereas all my friends who I went to university with, they're starting to have grandkids now, and they've all had proper jobs where they went into offices and and sort of like did serious grown-up work, and they're really a little bit out of date when it comes to what's right for babies and new families. And I thought of some things that I was told when I first had my eldest, who's now 31. And I thought all the statements that I remember being told that were not actually true. They're not actually based on any scientific evidence or on any fact. And I realized that we have all this sort of bits and pieces that we've picked up, but we do need to have better evidence sometimes and access to better sort of scientific basis for what we've picked up so that we can strengthen our natural wisdom, because if you're all grandparents or grandparents to be, you have a lot of natural wisdom, and you can use scientific evidence to support and sometimes to redirect your natural wisdom. For example, I was told your baby needs to learn to be independent, so just leave him to cry, and crying is good for his lungs. Not true. Right? Crying isn't particularly good for babies' lungs, and there's some things that happen if a baby is left to cry which you probably don't particularly want to happen to their brain, which I might talk about later if we have time. You need baby soap, shampoo, and talcum powder to keep the baby clean. And this is something I explain in my grandinatal classes, actually. And it makes jaws drop. What? No talcum powder? No baby soap? Actually, no, because newborn skin is very, very delicate, and all these products are not really doing anything except potentially drying the skin or irritating their skin. I was told very firmly when my eldest is born, the baby will choke if he's lying on his back. And we were told to put our babies on their tummies. And that turned out to be a really major, major mistake, actually. Again, we'll go into this later on. Then I was told when it came to feeding my baby, I was breastfeeding or trying to, if you space out the feeds, the baby will learn to feed less often. And it doesn't really work like that. They just get hungry. Also, I was told the baby needs to be in their own room in order to get used to it. We now know that that's actually not safe for babies under the age of 6 months. At night, they really need to be sleeping in the same room as the adult who's looking after them. I was also told you should never, ever, ever take your baby into bed with you. That's a very complicated one. I'm hoping to have time this evening to go into that, today, I should say, because it's not evening for everyone, is it? You should, I want to have time to go into that a bit, because actually co-sleeping with babies is safe, but it has to be done in the right way and with observing certain very clear, risk factors. We were also told, oh, it doesn't matter if you're using formula milk. It's basically the same as breast milk. And now, of course, formula milk for babies is very good stuff, and it's really, really good for babies, but it's not the same as breast milk, not by a million miles. They are extremely different products. And I was also told home birth is downright dangerous. And then I did some reading and found that there'd been actually some research that shows completely the opposite. In fact, there was a huge study in the UK in about 2011 and 2012, which showed that planned births in the home with, trained attendants and midwives and so on was just as safe, and in some circumstances safer than planning a birth in a hospital. So that sort of is completely the opposite of what we were told. Completely the opposite of what we were told. So it's really, really hard sometimes to know what to think. I think I'm going to sort of try and focus, as Deb said, on this idea of how we can support mums and the idea of the bonding process. We knew about bonding when I had my babies, but we didn't necessarily know what was actually going on in bonding. We tend to think of it as just sort of like getting to know each other, loving each other, and so on. Okay. We've actually learned a great deal about the physiological changes which take place in the mum's body and in the baby's body after birth. And we know that because those physiological changes are so important, it's really, really helped if they have contact skin to skin for as much time as possible after the birth. Now, when I was born, I was taken away from my mother, wrapped up in God knows how many layers of blankets, and brought to her several hours later with a hat on, because they didn't want her to see that I had a big bruise on my head. And the only skin to skin contact she had with me was just a little, little face that size. Completely the opposite of what actually is physiologically important. Skin to skin contact between mum and baby straight after birth for as long as possible, like is happening down here, okay, with this picture here, with this baby lying directly on the mum's front. This is increasing in both mum and baby a hormone called oxytocin, which is the hormone that drives labor. It's the hormone that actually makes labor happen. And then after the baby's been born, it carries on doing amazing things. It starts the whole milk production process. It, in the baby, starts the process of starting to want to suck and find the breast. And it also starts the uterus contracting again, so that the mum can expel the placenta and the uterus contracts safely to do that. And the skin-to-skin contact is also regulating the baby's breathing, body temperature, heartbeat, and oxytocin levels. And the oxytocin is another thing oxytocin does, which is so interesting, is that it crosses to the brain. It doesn't cross to the brain, it's produced in the pituitary gland, it crosses to our actual brain, and affects the way we feel emotionally. And it's a big reason why, this funny little wrinkled thing comes into the world, and his or her mum looks at this funny little wrinkled person and says, "You are the most beautiful creature in the world. I will die for you." Okay, that's the oxytocin talking. And I remember actually being with a mum who'd just given birth and had sort of looking at her baby, and she was on this sort of amazing high, which mums, when it's all gone really well, and often you do see mums on this high when they've just had a baby. And it's not just relief. It's not just knowing that, they've got through it and that they've got their baby in their arms. It's an actual hormonal response. And I remember this mum looked at me and said, is this oxytocin, Sarah? And I said, yes, it's definitely oxytocin talking. You know, this is why you're feeling as though you've just been given the whiff of the most amazing drug in the world, because that's what it is. It's the hormone of love. It produces connection between human beings. And it produces this very, very important connection between mum and baby. The baby needs this mum to have a massive burst of oxytocin when this baby's born, because this baby needs that mum to really, really want to die for him or her. Okay. If you think of it, that is how we've evolved. And what else is it doing? It's doing quite a lot. Oh, I ought to have mentioned that, you know, doing things like cutting the cord and weighing the baby. These are things that can actually wait until mum and baby have had skin-to-skin contact. So you will hear birth professionals now talking, and doctors and medical professionals talking about maybe the golden hour, which is when the mum and the baby can just hold on to each other just after birth, as long as the baby's well, obviously, and, you know, isn't in need of some extra support, and be skin-to-skin contact. And it does doing something else as well. It's actually helping to start off the building up of the microbiome. Now, I'm sure some of you, you know about the microbiome. It's sometimes been called, I'm not a great expert on it, but it's sometimes been called our newly discovered organ, okay? Because it actually weighs about 3 pounds and some sort of ridiculous weight. And it plays an enormous role in our ability to fight off infection and to stay well. And a lot of the microbiome is basically our friendly bacteria. And the process of developing this population of friendly bacteria that help us to digest our food, fight off infection, and lots of other things, which I can't go into in detail this evening. It begins in the womb, but it continues as the baby's born, picking up the natural flora from the mum's body as the baby passes through the birth canal, and then continues when the baby has skin-to-skin contact straight after birth. So if the baby's had a cesarean birth, then that skin-to-skin contact obviously becomes super, super important to sort of get that process started. The mum's natural flora on her body starts to populate the baby's skin and starts to build up the natural flora on the baby's body. And then with the baby starts to feed, starts to have breast milk contains really, really important things called human milk oligosaccharides, which actually feed the friendly bacteria that start to, you know, multiply and develop in the baby's body, which are going to help the baby to digest. So the mum's skin-to-skin contact with the baby, this is the first thing to think about. So if we actually think about what it's like when this mum has just had a baby, the rest of us, you know, we need to step back. And this is one thing that I've realized as a grandparent is the bit which is hard for us is about, and this applies not just in the first day, but also later on and later hours, is to be able to step back and sit on our hands a bit. Can I just think about how traditionally societies have looked after new mothers? Is there anybody here from China or Korea or perhaps South America or Japan? I mean, if you get a chance afterwards, then just stick a hand up, because I'd really like to know more from you. In the UK and the US, we have quite different expectations of what mums really need. And I've noticed this, you know, since in the last 50 years, a lot of traditional ideas about what the life of a new mum should be has really, really changed. About 40 years ago, it wasn't uncommon in the UK for women to spend anything up to 10 days in hospital. Okay, now they'll spend 24 hours if they're lucky. And it wasn't uncommon for them to have what people would call the confinement. And that's an interesting word, confinement, because it suggests that she has to be kept in, really, and told that she mustn't go out. Well, every sort of traditional society has some kind of package of rituals around what we call either the fourth trimester, in other words, the fourth trimester of pregnancy. If you think of pregnancy as having 3 trimesters, 3 groups of, 3 parts of 3 months, the bit until the baby is from 0 to 3 months old, a good way of thinking about it is as the fourth trimester of pregnancy, because the mum's body isn't fully, back to her old self, if you like, and the baby is still very much sort of learning about to sort of get used to being outside the womb. Or we sometimes refer to the golden month, which is a really nice expression, because this is the sort of the first month, or typically in lots and lots of societies, 40 days, that magic number, 40 days, 6 weeks, in other words, when the woman is treated completely differently from any other time in her life. And it's usually the thing that all these different traditions have in common is that she's resting and she's nurturing her baby, and she's allowing other people to nurture her so that she can nurture her baby. It's not that other people are nurturing her baby or looking after her baby. She's looking after her baby and getting to know her baby, but it's the other people's job to, if you like, in so many societies, to look after her. Sometimes the rules could be quite strict. There's some things that I've learned about some other other traditions in other parts of the world. I'm not a great traveler, so somebody can correct me if I have any of this wrong. But Chinese tradition apparently says that women are expected to rest indoors for a full month after giving birth. And it's something sometimes called sitting the month. She's encouraged to maintain a certain hot-cold balance in her body. And there's a lot of emphasis on keeping her warm, okay, and restoring that balance. A great deal of emphasis on warmth. And in some cases, she's supposed to not even leave the house at all, okay, for 30 days, which could get a bit boring, actually, couldn't it? So I imagine quite a lot of new mums these days in Chinese traditions and in Chinese societies say, oh no, I'm going out, I mean, who can blame them? But also they're not supposed to walk around, they're not supposed to have a bath, they're not supposed to shower or touch cold water, certainly not allowed to have sex. Probably not too much sort of reluctance on that one, actually. But they also have to keep the house warm. And sometimes that means that they're told they have to have the air conditioning off, even if it's the height of summer, which can get quite steamy. And she's also given special food, really, really good, healthy food, such as, I found some fabulous recipes here, ginger chicken feet soup with peanuts, and which apparently is totally delicious. Pork and seaweed soup. I'm actually a big fan of seaweed. I know not everybody thinks seaweed sounds great to eat, but it's actually great. Pork and seaweed soup, and what was the other one? Pork and green papaya soup. I mean, these are healthy foods, but the thing is they are made freshly. They're not fast foods. They're not convenience foods. They're not ultra processed foods. In other words, they're foods with fresh ingredients, which will also help to support her microbiome and to support her own, natural, healthy gut flora. It's a really high protein diet because postnatally, new mums can get quite anemic, and keeping the iron levels up is really good. Offal is very, very commonly seen in these kind of diets, okay? And there's another thing called red date tea, which lots of postnatal doulas completely swear by. I don't know what evidence there is for red date tea. I wouldn't answer for that, but it's certainly very popular and apparently delicious and contains lots of antioxidants, so can't do you much harm. So it's absolutely, it's all about the good food and the rest, okay? And that's the care that the mum really it needs. That's the sort of common thing. Now, in Japan, very similarly, the new mum returns to her parents' house for anything up to 8 weeks. Apparently, the old tradition was actually a full 100 days before she went back to her husband's house. And she has no domestic duties for that time, and her mum takes care of her completely. It can be very restricting. I found a lovely blog post by a mum in sort of writing about her experiences as a mum in Japan. And she says, on one occasion, a couple of weeks after giving birth to our first child, the three of us went shopping together, and I was stopped by an oba-chan, which means older woman, and scolded for going out so soon after giving birth. I was then scolded once again by another oba-chan the same day while shopping at the grocery store. Although this did not stop me from going out with a baby when the weather was nice, I will say I tended to look outside my door or window very carefully before venturing out to see if any oba-chan were close by. And so many societies think it's completely okay to sort of take what you might call a collective responsibility for the well-being of new mums. Also in Japan, they have something called maternity hotels, which compete for custom by showing pictures on their websites of the fabulous food that you're going to get. I mean, if I could have another baby at my age, I would definitely go and have one in Japan, I think, when I look at that spread. So again, you see, this is fresh food. It's natural ingredients, quite simple ingredients. We've got fresh broccoli, we've got a beautiful salad, we've got fresh fruit, all not processed foods, but sort of like emphasis on vitamins. In Korea, it's 21 days. You see, there's a real theme going on here. The Samcheol, which means 21 days. I've probably pronounced that very, very badly. Not allowed to move around too much, confined to bed rest. This is supposed to help the uterus contract back to its pre-pregnancy state. I'm not sure if there's any actual evidence for that, but anyway, but the bed rest is a nice thought. And traditionally they're given miyuguk. I don't think I've pronounced that at all well. Seaweed soup 3 times a day for at least a month. And that is incredibly delicious, apparently, if you like seaweed, which I do. So, and they have to wear thick clothes and wear socks. So it's the same sort of theme. You see, they're very, very similar themes. In some Latin American countries, there are also some really wonderful traditions. Also around this magic 40-day figure. And, you know, if you think about many, many traditions also, biblically, 40 days is a very sort of important number, during which she abstains from sex. She's solely dedicated to breastfeeding and taking care of her baby and herself. And other members of the family pitch in to cook and clean, take care of other children if there are any. And there are also wonderful herbal remedies in Latin American traditions, as also, by the way, in China as well, to help recovery, and special meals, vegetable soup, etc. But the one which I think is we're most familiar with is what's called closing the bones ceremony. This is one which has become quite popular actually in the UK. It's there are some practitioners I know of here in London who actually offer this. It's a ceremony which involves, among other things, the mum is wrapped. She lies down and she's wrapped up in lots and lots of scarves all down her body. You see, round her head, and then round her breasts here, and round and her tummy, all the way down, and they're tightly tied around her so that she feels sort of almost swaddled, really, like a baby. And there'll be someone very close by holding the baby so that she's not separated from her baby. It's a pretty amazing ceremony.
Sarah, may I interrupt for a moment? It's 12:35. This time is really flying very quickly, and you're giving us fascinating information about how things have changed and how different cultures treat birthing. Can we talk a little bit now with that, having that background information? What does that mean for grandparents now? How does we let that information inform our grandparenting?
Right. How does it mean for grandparents? Well, one thing it means for grandparents, I just go straight through to my my grandparent do's and don'ts. Okay. If we think about it, one thing that really, really counts is what we say to our family members. Okay. For as grandparents, everything that we say just has so much weight. There's so much baggage behind it. So if, for example, she had a difficult birth, some things that really, really are not helpful. If you think about saying, well, so say a mum has a really difficult birth, a traumatic birth, and she feels as though she sort of like, went through the wars and is quite traumatized. And somebody says to her, well, at least you have a healthy baby. Okay. Or they say, well, you should be grateful that, you're alive and your baby's alive. Or they say, well, it could have been so much worse. What they're saying, what this message really conveys is that her feelings of having had a terrible time don't really matter. It's not her feelings no longer matter. She's already in a world where the baby has actually displaced her from being the center of her world. Okay, so this is one thing to really think about as grandparents, is what we say really, really matters and what we don't say. I'll come back to breastfeeding more, because what I just want to share with you is that if your family member wants to breastfeed, please hop on this website. I'll send the link to Deb, or put it in the chat if you like later on. Hop on this website, which is this wonderful British charity called the Association of Breastfeeding Mothers, and do the Team Baby course, because it tells you all about how breastfeeding works. Let's think about sleeping. Okay. There are various charities that will support and give you proper information about where the baby should sleep. One of them is the Lullaby Trust. Okay, this is part of their website here that you can see. And they have this little graphic, which I sometimes show to classes, which shows you lots of things which are really, really dangerous. And you look at that and you think, well, that's a perfectly happy baby. But actually, there's a whole bunch of stuff in that room that's actually very dangerous for that baby. That baby has multiple risks of sudden infant death syndrome, such as the baby being in their own room, sleeping on their side, the baby's not in the right place in the cot, there's bedding, the baby's going to be too warm, it's near a radiator, etc., etc. The Safe Sleep 7, again, this is a good website to go to. La Lèche League, very supportive for breastfeeding mums. And this is their set of rules for safe sleeping if they're co-sleeping. You may be surprised to know, or many grandparents are surprised nowadays to find, that our midwives in the UK, they will show a mum how to co-sleep in the same bed as her baby, or when she comes to visit the mum the day after they've come home from hospital. So if the mum is breastfeeding and says, we really don't seem to be able to get much sleep because the baby's waking up all night and wants to feed, then the midwife will show the mum how to do it safely, how to make sure that they're in the right kind of environment, and that the bedding is away from the baby. And if the baby is in a separate cot, this is how they should be. You notice there are no toys, and by the way, no cot bumpers. Do you remember cot bumpers? We were all given cot bumpers. I certainly was. And these are some typical safe co-sleeping situations. You notice that the baby's not next to the dad or the partner, but next to the mum. And again, you could find out more about this from the Lullaby Trust, from the Lèche League, and also from a really great site called Basis, basis.org.uk.
Sarah,
okay. Yep.
I'm wondering, one of the most common questions that a grandparent to be can have is, how do we define ourselves in our new role as a grandparent, especially with all this information? What's the best tip you would have for someone asking this question?
Absolutely. How do we define ourselves as a grandparent? And I would say turn it round and find out from the family what they need from you. Okay, what do they think they will need? Don't try and surprise them with something with a gift that you thought was great or that you've seen an ad for. I've made that mistake myself, and which isn't actually going to be what they need. So turn it around, ask them, what do you really need, and what can I do for you? And think about how we've always supported mums so that their recovery is strong and healthy. We've supported them by giving them the space to care for that baby, not by getting in between the mum and the baby. Do you get me? So whatever kind of society you're in, whatever kind of community you're in, you can find how to do that, whether it's by coming and doing some cooking, or simply or organizing some cooking for them, or whether it's by doing some cleaning in the house. Always visit the house with a job that you can do, not you're there to support, not to be waited on hand and foot, and not to get in between the mum and the baby. So remember what I said about the first golden hour and the mum skin to skin contact. That carries on being important. Later on, when mum comes home from hospital, if she's had a hospital birth and people are starting to come to visit, what's the first thing everybody wants to do? They want to hold the baby, right? They want to hold the baby. Oh, can I have a go? Oh, yes, can I have a go? So imagine you're a newborn baby. You're just getting used to your mum's smell and to her arms and her heartbeat and her voice. And that's all pretty amazing for a start. And then suddenly one day, 3 days into this whole being on earth experience, you find you're being held by this person and then that person and then that person. And they're all standing in a room and they're passing you around like a little parcel. And then after a couple of hours, they all go away and they've left behind a load of washing up, which mum and her partner may or may not have the energy to do, and a totally frazzled, overexcited baby who's had a massive sensory overload and can't stop crying. When babies get the sensory overload, their cortisol rises, and cortisol is the stress hormone. And the curious thing about babies is that they can't lower that hormone on their own. They can only lower it if, let me just grab a prop. They can only lower it if someone is holding them. So here's a baby crying, okay, over there in the crib. And that baby's cortisol level, is going up and up and up and up. At a certain level, it starts to actually flood the brain in quite a toxic way. If I pick the baby up, baby's still crying, but this is the only way that this baby's cortisol levels are going to start to lower down. Okay, is by picking this baby up and giving him a cuddle, or her, whatever she is. So that's one thing we can do, is by not getting in between mum and baby. Okay.
So that begs the question, grandparents can't wait to hold that baby. How do we manage our expectations? What would you say? How would you work with grandparents to manage their expectations?
There's a lot of grandparenting coming up, is one thing. The newborn phase is not really the part that's the biggest part, is it? I mean, of course, it's wonderful. It's very exciting, but there's so much grandparenting coming up, and grandparenting in the toddler years is really, really helpful, because you're another pair of eyes to try and, see where this little one is going. And there is so much to be gained by just sitting back and saying to the new mom and the new dad as well, don't forget about him, you're doing a great job. That is really helpful grandparenting. If you do that a lot, you'll get asked back, and you'll get asked back, over and over again. But if you're saying, well, when you were little, I used to hold you this way, or I used to do that, or I used to do that. And, you sure should be feeding often enough? Oh dear, oh dear, is having another feed? Oh dear, it seems rather, seems to be feeding rather. Are you sure you've got enough milk? And sort of sowing doubt in our family member's mind isn't really going to be terribly helpful, is it? So making supportive and positive remarks. I mean, how as a parent, one negative remark is worth at least 3 positive ones, in the the energy that the person receiving those remarks gets from it. They need an awful lot of positive remarks, and you're doing a great job is one of the simple, straightforward things that we can say, even if they're not really doing a great job. Okay. I mean, as long as the baby's safe, then you're doing a great job is wonderful to hear. Does
So
that help?
There are boundaries to respect here, it sounds like.
Yes, very much so. Yes. I think that a lot of sitting on your hands and buttoning your lip sometimes is worth thinking about. Okay. Remembering that they're parents of their own generation and they've got their way of doing things, and we had our way of doing things. And also, if, for example, you're not, with your former partner anymore, and there are other parents, grandparents sort of all in the mix, you're all going to have a different take on things, aren't you? So is it really helpful for this new parent to have a whole range of different voices coming at them? What's really important is that they feel confident in their own role. Now, one thing that postnatal doulas are trained to keep in mind is we're not there to take the baby from the mum and look after the baby and show the mum how brilliant we are with babies. We're there to have the mum turn around after 6 weeks, 3 months, whatever, and say, do you know what? I can do this myself now. I feel I'm really good at this. And I feel that as grandparents, that can be a really positive aim as well. Then, though, I've noticed, I don't know if any of you are on sort of grandparenting forums. I expect those of you who are already grandparents are, if you've noticed that one of the things that comes up is being used as free childcare. And in some cultures, that's absolutely fine and acceptable. And it's what people expect. And it's what grandparents expect and like and enjoy. But in other cultures, it's not really totally the norm, or even if it is the norm, there are, ways in which people can overstep, aren't there? Just sort of like feeling a bit used. Does anyone know what I mean? And I think that it's important to have a few honest conversations about that. Tricky one, very tricky one.
Sarah, it sounds like we are just scratching the surface with what can happen now in the role of grandparenting. And we've just started at the baby stage. So I know there are a lot of questions. And as a matter of fact, we have Gloria here who has said, this was wonderful. Can Sarah do a class for grandparents of toddlers? And I know that you mentioned that. You mentioned that that's when grandparenting really kicks in, when we're beyond, even a little bit beyond the baby stage. And so that's just some feedback. Gloria, do you have anything that you would like to add in that comment or that question?
Gloria, where's Gloria?
Yes. You can hear me, hopefully.
Hi. Yes, I can.
Yes. Especially, I'm a grandparent of he's about to be 4. Okay. COVID has really been detrimental. I mean, to my psyche, even. I mean, it's really, they dared come visit me. They live in Dallas, Texas. I'm in South Texas. That makes it even more intense. In fact, it's bringing tears to my eyes right now. I've seen him. They dared to come visit me once in this year. And it's just tremendous, for me right now. I miss them so much. And I wouldn't have missed this class for the world, because I want to know how to be a good long distance grandmother. I mean, that's how I feel right now.
So as you say, it has been a horrible, horrible 18 months for grandparents, hasn't it?
Yes.
Really, really horrible. And so many of us have not even been able to see our grandkids. But there's going to be an end to this. And really a 4-year-old, I mean, I hope that going forwards, do you feel that you'll be able to see more of your grandson?
I think so, but you know, we've took a turn for the worse with the variant.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, the
okay.
variant. We're now, they're calling it the fourth surge. And so now everybody in Texas, especially Texas, is one of the worst states with Florida. And so now they're urging us, I mean, restaurants are thinking of closing up again. I mean, it's getting quite serious in Texas.
I see. It's getting that is getting very bad, isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't want to have anything happen to him.
No, you're of course more at risk than he is, aren't you, in age-wise? But the thing is that long distance grandparenting can take the form of WhatsApp video calls. So I mean, the other grandparent, right, to my grandchild is actually in Poland. I'm in the UK. She has hardly seen him for nearly a year now. Every evening they chat on by WhatsApp, and you know his mum just props the phone up in front of his, but he's having his supper, and he chats away to her every single evening by WhatsApp. If you want to go up on the technology, then Facebook Portal is a very good tool for grandparents. It's because then little ones don't want to sit still in front of something all the time, and with that kind of technology, you can watch them run around the room. And I mean, another family member of mine has been reading bedtime stories to her grandchildren on the other side of the country all through lockdown using that technology. So, you know, we are lucky in a way that we do have technology to do long distance grandparenting. We just can't give them a hug. That's the trouble. But as they get older, then phone calls become more important, video calls become more important, letters become more important, and listening to your grandchildren, trying to get into their world, trying to find out what's interesting for them, you know, what they do, and being aware that they're changing so fast. So you know, keeping up with them. It's hard work, isn't it? I'm so sorry, Gloria. You must be longing to see that little boy.
Yeah, I think Gloria speaks for so many people in this room. And you know, the one thing that we have is Get Set Up. It's one of the reasons why Get Set Up is in existence, to help grandparents get technically savvy and to be able to connect like this with grandchildren when we're not able to do so otherwise. So we're really getting to the end of our session here today, and I'm going to have to say I'm sorry to the person, Joe Miller. You asked a question about sleep aggression. We're just not able to get to that today.
Sleep regression. Oh my God, we could go on. Sleep regression. Yeah, at 4 months. It's not regression. It's not regression, Joe. It's advancement. It's a baby's brain developing more abilities, and it passes. Okay. It passes. It's not going back, it's going forwards, only in a very funny way. And so that's what I tend to say to parents. I want to also ask Janice, what is Marco Polo? Janice just put in on the thing in the chat. What we also love Marco Polo. Is that a game? It's a game. It's a game online, I believe. Is that right then, Janice? A game. So you play it with your grandkids? I think it's an app. It's an app. Yeah. Okay. Okay, well, we need to let that be the last word. So I want to thank you, Sarah. It's been great. And I know we've just touched the surface. Yeah. And there's so much more, but we do have information in the chat. We'll be sending it out in the email afterward that you can access to help you to find even more information about how to be the best grandparent ever, especially during this time when we have so many limitations. And you can also connect to her website, which will be included in the chat,
connect on Facebook, connect on Instagram, a myriad of ways to stay in touch with Sarah. And I really want to say thank you to the audience here in the front row for this class and in our live stream communities. If you'd like to get a recording of this event, you can email our support team at help@getsetup.io. And if you happen to be new to Get Set Up, we hope that you've gotten a good taste of what we do. We do have over 500 online classes weekly, and they're all designed for older adults, and they're taught by older adults like me. The classes are free, and we work with local governments and also with community organizations and Medicare organizations. And those organizations support their members with free classes. I do want to draw your attention. I believe there should be some slides up there that say that we've got some other classes you might like. Look for a link to sign up in the chat. You can sign up for classes there and in our live streams, and also at www.getsetup.org. So there's lots of places where you can sign up. Remember, everybody who registered is going to get a email after the event with all these follow-up links and notes. So if you're rushing to kind of copy things down that are in the chat and you're here registered for the event, no worries, you'll get the email after class. We do look forward to seeing all of you in a future class, and I want to thank you all for coming today. Have a great